Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. I want to talk a little college hoops. First of all, college hoops is coming quick, man. 4 weeks from last Monday, so yesterday as I record here, opening night, Florida versus Arizona, BYU versus Villanova in Vegas. I'll be at those games. Probably do an event from Circa as well. We'll keep you posted on that. Oh, by the way, AP poll comes out next Monday. With that said, what's also interesting is it feels like we are finally starting to make some headway in recruiting, where I think a lot of the best players have kind of been in a holding pattern, trying to figure out the situation with NIL, rev share, whatever. And it feels like the player we have talked about the most, the number one recruit in America, appears to be ready to come off the board. Tyran Stokes, 6'7", forward, originally from Louisville, plays his high school ball about a mile from where you see that little finger right there, about a mile from where this finger is. Tyran Stokes plays basketball at Notre Dame High School, Sherman Oaks, California. Okay, great player. We're going to get to the recruitment in a minute. If you're watching this, you know the kind of player that he is. 6'7", power guard. I mean, just can get to the rim, can finish. I've said it a million times. I love the way that he played for Team USA this summer because he was playing with AJ DeBonsa. He was playing with Mikael Brown Jr. and really found that role of, I'm going to be just the dude that does all the little things, comes off the bench and provides a bunch of scoring, a bunch of toughness, a bunch of whatever. But then conversely, also on top of that, is just the type of player that you can build around and can be a star. I think he's probably the only player in the class of 2026 that can come in as a one and done and be like a true dude, the way that Cooper Flagg was a dude last year, the way that I think we all think AJ DeBonsa is going to be, Darren Peterson's going to be, who else? Cam Boozer, Brandon Miller. I just said Darren Miller. Brandon Miller was at Alabama. I think Tyran Stokes is the only player in the class of 2026 that can be that kind of guy. And so you can see where his recruitment would be very interesting. So let's get to the updates with the recruitment. First of all, last Friday, what Border League was basically going on. Border League is a big, it's like a high school AAU event basically in Vegas. I was supposed to be out there. I was out there for the NIL event. But I just bring it up because at Border League, he announced his official top five, final five. They were Kentucky, Louisville, Oregon, USC, and Kansas. And so the top five got announced. And then basically, just as soon as that top five got announced, there was a crystal ball for the University of Kentucky. We posted it on our Torres on UK account. By the way, this one is official. We may have accidentally posted a fake crystal ball from a burner account a few days ago. This one is real from 24/7 Sports. They have Tyran Stokes expected to commit to Kentucky. I'll say this. I think he is going to end up at Kentucky, and I think the commitment could come soon. His 18th birthday, by the way, happy birthday, Tyran Stokes, is this Sunday, October 12th. I think it is going to come right around them, maybe as early as Friday, maybe right around his birthday, maybe into early next week. But I let me put it this way. I don't think that this is a recruitment that is going to go on for months and months. And just because he cut his, let me put it this way. It ain't going to be Nate Ament who cut his list to 5 in November and committed in April. And every week was just taking another random visit. I think this kid, has a pretty good feel for where he wants to go. And I'll be transparent. I do think it's Kentucky. I'll be careful, though, because in the past I have made not blatant, but I've made this is going to happen, da-da-da-da, and sometimes it doesn't work out. So I'm going to be careful, but I do think it's Kentucky. And I think part of why it's Kentucky, I do think you can start to eliminate some other schools. I think USC is a great spot for a lot of people. I understand that, Eric Musselman, first of all, and I've said this, I think we forget how good of a recruiter Eric Musselman is. At Arkansas, got in Anthony Black, got in Nick Smith Jr., Ron Holland would have gone there if he had gone to college. He was in that last group of G League Ignite players. Moses Moody, Jalen Williams, who's now an NBA champion. You go on and on down the list. So Coach Muss is a great recruiter. And Tyron Stokes is playing and living in LA right now. I'll be honest, I don't think that's going to be a fit. Okay. Kansas. I know last week there was Taylon Kinney saying I'm recruiting Tyron Stokes. And I think even right after that, there was a little bit of Kansas buzz. I'm going to tell you right now, as of 11:51 Eastern time, always subject to change on October 7th. I don't think it's going to be Kansas. I think it's worth noting Tyron Stokes did officially sign an NIL deal with Nike last week. To me, that's a pretty good indicator that it's probably not going to be an Adidas school. I know that that's not a be-all, end-all. We've talked about it. Cooper Flagg signed with New Balance, still ended up at Duke. Now, it's worth noting, by the way, Cooper Flagg signed with New Balance after he ended up at Duke and after he was already on campus. Darius Acuff is at Arkansas. He has signed with Reebok. That's a little bit different. He had been committed and signed to Arkansas for months, not to mention that there are no Reebok schools. So it's not like he could go to this school that's sponsored by Reebok. They don't exist. So I just bring it up because the shoe affiliation probably isn't as important as it once was. But I find it hard to believe that Nike is going to commit to this kid and let him just walk to another place. Doesn't make sense to me. And so I think it's going to be a Nike school. I don't think it's going to be Kansas. Like I said, there was some buzz a week ago, but I don't think it's going to be Kansas. As far as Louisville, it's funny with Louisville. I actually did a little bit of homework on this one. And it's interesting, right? Because Louisville was perceived to be a favorite for quite some time. What I have since found out, by the way, Tyron Stokes is originally from Louisville, so that's the Louisville, Kentucky connection. They were perceived to be the favorite. I believe they got his first official visit. He visited Louisville, Kansas in the spring. But I bring it up because I think the more time has gone on, Louisville has faded. Now, listen, I know Kentucky fans are going to say, oh, my goodness, Louisville poverty program. I don't think it's that at all. I do think what it is to me more than anything, honestly, is just that I think maybe he was never I don't think Louisville was ever in as good a position for Tyron Stokes as I think a lot of people may have thought. I was talking to somebody who I trust, and I think what we have to remember, a lot of these players have big camps. They have an agent, they have somebody that kind of helps them with stuff. They have mom, they have dad, they have whoever, they have their own opinions. And what I was kind of told, and I think it kind of lines up with everything, is that I think there was maybe people or someone in Tyron Stokes' camp that wanted Louisville, and maybe they were maybe a little bit more vocal than, I don't want to say they should have been, but like I said, and this isn't a negative, by the way, I want to be clear with that, is you hear stories all the time about, dad really liked that school, but mom liked that school, but the player liked that school. I know of one really prominent transfer this offseason that it was like the agent was really pushing for one school. Dad kind of felt like there was another spot, and the kid wanted to go someplace else, and he ended up going someplace else. And so I think with Louisville, what I've kind of uncovered, if you will, the last couple of days is that I do think, and I do wonder if maybe there was somebody that wanted Louisville maybe a little bit more than Tyron did. And I don't know how much of a factor Louisville really was for Tyron. And then I think on top of it, there's also the variable of Adidas school, all of that. And so because of it, I think it's a tough sell. Again, when you're an Adidas school, I think your backs up against the wall. I know everybody's crapping on Louisville right now. I don't know that they were ever as much of a favorite as they were perceived. Brings us to Oregon and Kentucky, and I'll just say this. Listen, could it be Oregon? Of course. Oregon it's the premier Nike school. They can do true NIL with Nike in ways that maybe other schools can't. It could be Oregon, and I think if it's not Kentucky, it will be Oregon. But I do think it is Kentucky. And again, a lot of people have been burned by predictions for Kentucky in the past. I remember last spring, I said Lamar Wilkerson. I felt really good that he was going to Kentucky. Donovan Dent, we did a video. It was down to Kentucky or UCLA, and I kind of felt like it was UCLA. I don't know if they could keep up. But for Kentucky, it just makes too much sense. First of all, the offense, the system, you're going to be playing with other really good players in a high-octane system. Like if you're Tyron Stokes, let me put it this way. I'm not trying to be a jerk. I'm just trying to be honest. Are you really going to go to Oregon with a coach who every single year it feels like is on the precipice of retirement? I know they basically make the tournament every year, but I don't know. It feels weird. Like there's not a 0% chance that the coach could retire before you get there. He's in his 70s, I think, at this point. Kentucky is the home state school. High octane offense. You'd be the face of the program. I think the other thing too with Kentucky that's worth noting, if you remember that story that we talked about over the spring or in the summer, Matt Norlander basically reported that Kentucky is going to give more of their rev share money to basketball than probably any school in the country, or at least any Power 4 school. For people, I'll be quick, side tangent. I know I'm all over the place, but again, rev share. What is rev share? Every school is allowed to pay its athletes $20.5 million. Okay. So that comes directly from the school. You can get NIL outside of rev share, but from the school directly, they are allowed to pay $20.5 million to the entire athletic department. Okay. And so virtually every school in America is basically breaking it down the same way. Football is going to get like 80 to 85% of the rev share. Men's basketball is probably going to get 10 to 15%, maybe 20% in a handful of select cases. And then everybody gets everything else, the 3 to 5 to 8% that's left over. Okay. And the math is going to change a little bit at every school, but there's no requirement that football does get a certain percentage. There's no requirement that football does get 80%, that football does get 85%. And what's interesting about it is there was actually a story from the summer that Greg Sankey in the SEC was trying to put universal caps on each program. Football can only spend this much percentage. Basketball can only spend this much percentage. Whatever. Baseball cannot spend more than this. And the school that opposed it more than anybody? It was Kentucky. Kentucky did not want a cap on its basketball program. And basically, Kentucky never wanted to be in a situation where they're even on a level playing field with everybody else. They said, look, we're Kentucky. We're different. We're not going to, if we want to spend $10 million on our basketball roster, we should be allowed to do it. And so the Matt Norlander report from over the summer, if you remember, was that Kentucky might be willing to pay like upwards of, 40 to 45% of its rev share, 40 to 45% of that $20.5 million pot on its basketball program. Now, I know Mark Stoops denied that after the fact, but of course he's going to deny it. What is he going to say? I'm a poverty program and I have no chance to compete because my school's not going to support me? No. Now, I will say I think it's interesting as to what that would mean for a potential Kentucky basketball coaching or Kentucky football coaching search, but that's another conversation for another day. I think the bottom line is whatever the upper tier of Power 4 schools spending in NIL, I think it's fair to say that Kentucky is going to be in the 1% of 1%. And we shouldn't be surprised by that because of the fact that, again, it's Kentucky. It is. People could say, it is different, respectfully, than even Florida, Texas, Purdue, India. Like, it's different. And so to me, I'm not surprised that Matt Norlander report came out. I believe Matt Norlander's reporting because he doesn't miss on stuff like this. And he put out that Kentucky's going to spend significantly more, maybe triple what everybody else is going to spend. And so if that's the case, well, guess what? They have a bigger pot to guarantee up front. That's been the big issue right now in high school basketball recruiting. None of these kids are committing because nobody can promise them, hey, this is how much we could actually pay you. It's, hey, we're at 15 to 20%. We have a cap of 2 to 3 million, maybe 4, and we don't know how we're going to spend it until we get to portal season. Well, if Kentucky has a cap of like 9 million because the school is giving them more of their rev share money, and I know I'm a little bit in the weeds, but I'm trying to explain why I think it's going to be Kentucky. Kentucky can offer them 2 million, 3 million, 4 million, whatever it takes to close the deal, and just say, yeah, and we'll still have money to put together a nice roster around you. So I'm a little bit in the weeds, but I think it's going to be Kentucky. I think the other thing to keep an eye on is commitment date. Again, this stuff is always subject to change. We are recording. It is exactly noon Eastern. It is exactly noon Eastern right now on Tuesday, October 7th. By the time you listen to this, there may be a commitment date set. There might be a commitment period. But I think sometime between this coming Friday to the following Monday, Tuesday, so October 13th, 14th, somewhere in there, I think he's going to commit. I think it's going to happen around his 18th birthday, which is this coming Sunday. And right now, I don't do crystal balls, and I've got burned before by saying this guy's leaning here, this guy's leaning there. But I got to tell you what I know right now, and I do feel like it's going to be Kentucky.